Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Sanders, and this is Watch Art Sci, the art and science of watch collection. Today, we're going to talk about art and watches. Now, this isn't exactly what you think it is. When we see something like The Skull by Fiona Kruger, or we see in the background, you can see that Van Cleef and Arpels planets are over to the far left is the H. Moser, which is very kind of minimalist art. Uh, it's more than that. There are really three kinds of art in a watch, and perhaps there's part of its design and so forth. So we're going to include all of that. Um, First of all, I think, is that you have some kind of design elements that are what we'll call practical aspects or technical. And this is so that the watch has all of the parts, they all fit together and it runs. The second part is what I call information design, and that is that so when you look at your watch, you can tell what time it is. This one I have on, by the way, watch check is Beauvais 1930. Um, the but there's more to it than that, and we're going to concentrate primarily on the what we'll call pure art, or sort of the visual and visceral artistic aspects of a watch. Okay, so let's get started. And the first thing I want to take a look at are these two watches. One is, I think it's Traditionnel by Vacheron Constantin and a Parmigiani Toric. Now, I didn't put the names of the watches or anything else with them on purpose, but then I told you what they were. Anyway, they really do the same thing in terms of functionality. They do it in different ways. They both have the hour and the minute with on the central part of the watch. The Vacheron Constantin has the small seconds at 9 o'clock, and the Parmigiani has the central seconds in a sweep hand. The Vacheron Constantin has at 3 o'clock, there's a little date window that just shows the current date, whereas on the Parmigiani at 6 o'clock, there's a little U-shaped window showing the current day, the day before, and the next day. So that while they do exactly the same thing information-wise, they do it differently design-wise. And this is part of the art. In fact, to me, it's the most important part of the art. Okay, well, let's go on. Here are three watches. They're all by F.P. Journe. And on the one hand, you can see the similarities. They have similar hands, similar fonts, and similar case designs, as well as similar crowns. They have that flat crown on F.P. Journe's, but they're different. And so if you see one of these watches, you look at it and you say, okay, well, that's an F.P. Journe. I can tell them, even though those are different. We'll get back to that in a bit. But that's another kind of, they have sort of an artistic look to them. By the way, just that Chronomet blue on the far left, there is now a 5-year waiting list for that. I was really surprised. I know some people who have them, and man, I tell you, of those three watches, if you go to the AD, they're the least expensive. But if you want one right away, they're the most expensive because they've jumped over the other ones in value. Okay. All right, now here are three watches that, again, they all do the same thing. They all do it a little differently, but there's some more similarities. The similarities is in the sense that they're sports watches. They have a sports look to them. after a fashion, not a true roll in the mud kind of sport, not a what do they call this? The shock. Forgot what those those are. They're the sporty kind of watch. Okay, so if you look at those, you can see, yeah, they're different, but they're the same. And this is another part of the art, and the art is the art of a sports watch, um, sort of a fancy sports watch, but a sports watch. Here, a couple more. Now, here you have two watches that are very similar and very different right at the same time. If you look at the Breguet on the right, you can see the hands, or what are called Breguet hands, with the little moons near the tips, and then on the second hand, with the sweep hand, you have a little moon on the bottom of it. The date window at 3 o'clock has a little tilt to it. On the Rolex, on the other hand, you don't have any 1 through 12 numbers. On the other hand, though, you have sort of those little 5 through 60 values showing the minute. And again, if you look at them, you can see, well, they do the same thing, and they both have the metal bands on, or metal bracelets, but they're different. And the thing that makes watches different and attractive, and why we like them, has a lot to do with the art. I mean, I was reading about the Rolex, and they use, I think, I forgot which one it was. Oh, it's their diver watch that they have, the Submariner, and they have a different font. They're all caps, but they're a different font that they use for the name of the watch, which I thought was sort of interesting. The Breguet, on the other hand, you can, if you draw a line from the 4 to the 8, right in the middle there, very subtly, they have some like Breguet or something like that. That's another style of Breguet watches, along with, of course, their name at the top. Again, all of these things we're looking at, we don't notice. These are very much, there are artists and designers who worry a lot about that. So somebody sees that watch and they say, wow, I like that. What I want to do now is that one of our collectors, Healer74, made a little artistic comment about a particular Mont Blanc watch and the Minerva movement with it. So I'm going to play that video now. So let's watch it first. Okay, well, that was an interesting little video there, and what it's sort of, to me, is sort of a watch collector's celebratory, using video and art and still pictures and putting it all together, plus music and so forth, as another type of artistic expression of watches. There was a video done a couple years ago by on the regatta model of the Elise Nardine, one of the coolest videos I've ever seen. But again, this was the video art of the watch, and the watch ended up winning a Grand Prix prize, and I thought it was. I said, that's got to be because of the video, because the video was so cool. So art becomes part of why people want to have a watch, certain types of watch. Now, here are three watches here that have unique fonts that they use again and again and again. When you see the watch, you see the same font. In this case, there's a Lange, und Sunden, you have Hermes, and then you have Nomos. Each one of them has a very unique font. The A. Lange is what I sort of see as a more traditional, old-fashioned kind of watch font. Hermes, they did something very interesting. They went out and they hired somebody from MoMA, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, to do a design. This guy his stuff was shown at the Metropolitan Art, and he came up with this, just to me, this very simple yet fascinating font. This is a font I like very much, and so this makes me, as part of the reason I like Hermes watches. And they have a Vasseur movement in them too, which is another plus. Nomos is known for its Bauhaus look, and you can see it in the font. The fonts, though, are very distinctive, very clear fonts as well. So it's another type of artistic element to it. Now, one of the companies that has its own font and uses it with every watch, not just some, but all of them. And that is FP Journe. And not only do you use the same font, that they have the numbers all facing with inward, and so you'll have the 6 at the bottom when they have it up to, it looks something like a 9. You can see it on the far right on the Chronomètre Souverain. But if you look even at the details up in the upper right, you can see the number 2. And you see the same number 2 using the same font on the power reserve indicator. On one of the 2 time subdials on the resonance, you see the same thing. And up in the upper left, those are 2 brand new watches, 2018 watches that came out, or at least dial designs that came out for their line sport watches. And they too have the same fonts. That's one thing. Some companies do it with all their watches. FP Journe is one of them. Other companies, I know that Patek Philippe has different fonts for different kinds of things. Their aviation watch, for example, has a font that's different from some of the others. RGM also. You'll see certain fonts for the what's that called? The Pennsylvania group of watches, another one for the Corps of Engineers. And so this is something, sometimes they do it to focus on the type of watch and what it has to say. Other times it's throughout the whole company, like FP Journe. Again, these are very important aspects of art. Now, some watches are just art themselves. Here's one, and it's got I think this is from Chanel. They have the hour hand and the minute hand. Those are, I think they're leaf hands, what the shape is called. And then they have flowers, and there's no indexes or anything else. So it's something that you can tell time with. Whether it's really 4 or 5 may be a difficult thing to say at some time. But here's where you simply put art on top of the watch. The other kinds of artistic expressions that they have here are 4 that I found. One is a Cartier Tank Follet. It just knocks me out. I love that watch. They have another one called Crash. This one I like even better than their Crash watch. In the lower left is a Patek Philippe. It's just amazing. It's a 5160 Healer 74. That's one of his watches. Just amazing watch. All those little bridges, and they have engraving on all of the bridges, and so it's almost like a skeletonized watch, but It's an artistic statement at the same time. In the middle, at the bottom, is Jacques Drot, and it's the Automata, which is they have the birds and the little egg opens and it puts on a little show. One of the most incredible watches is Roger Dubois Excalibur. And they have the Knights of the Round Table, 12 of them around the dial. And it's a pretty big watch, a little miniature, all of the Knights of the Round Table there. So, I mean, there's a lot that people do with art, with watches. But most of it is just little subtle things that we saw when you look at the differences in watches. This is a new brand, and it's one that was put out by the Richemont Group. You probably have heard of Baume Mercier. It's the same Baume, but Mercier is not along for the ride on this one. This is sort of a lower end watch. And what they're trying to do things so that everything is recyclable. You can recycle it. They use Miyota or Ronda movements. These are not very, I mean, they're cheap movements. I'll put it that way. But this particular one, this is a limited edition watch. It's about $1,600, which is for a Baume watch is sort of the higher end that they have. But they're trying to do some different things, and this is with a case made from old skateboard decks. You know, but it's a very interesting design. And I looked at it, and I finally realized that's the design of a regulator. So this is another type of aspect of it, the way in which you decide to put the information, which is the hands, can also be part of an artistic statement. All right, the final one, and I want to use this as an example probably of a lot of different schools of art that's represented. I'm no artist by a long shot. This one is one of my favorite. It is my favorite Rolex watch, and it's primarily because of the Art Deco design of the watch. Not only for the dial, but also for the movement. How this circular guilloche or Geneva waves on the back are. I mean, Art Deco is a very geometrical type of art, and what they've done with this watch to me is just a perfect example of that. Some of the different schools of art, like I said, I'm no artist, and I don't know all of them. Art Nouveau or some of the older ones, you'll see some of these flourishes going through them, and then there's a type of art, and I don't mean, sort of Andy Warhol splashing colors on something, even though there is that, but it's part of a watch. And to me, the most interesting part of the art is simply in the design of the information. Now, like I said, I'm big on information design, but there's an artistic way to do it by the use of fonts and styles that make the watch, you can tell at a glance, one watch from the other. And like I was saying earlier, the FP Journes all have the same font, so you can see that. And they do some interesting things. Excuse me. If you look at the 8 and the 7, they're smaller. This is one of the things that FP Journe has. If he needs a little more room, he just shrinks the numbers a little. It's just part of, again, it's a part of an artistic decision. And I say, well, it's a design decision, but design is part of the art of it. Okay, well, listen, I'd be very interested to hear what you have to say about this. And it's one of those things we don't really talk about too much. The whole notion of guys and watches is sort of along a different line, but the thing is, it has impact on the decisions we make, and we should be aware of it. Okay, so I really want to hear from you. And of course, this is always an invitation to subscribe if you'd like. And until Sunday, this is Bill Sanders for Watch Art Sci, the art and science of watch collection.